of winter? Most of the country has been in a deep freeze, and we still have months to go.
It's important to distinguish between a little bit of maybe winter blues or feeling down and seasonal affective disorder, which can actually be very serious.
We talked to a doctor about seasonal affective disorder, how to know if you have it, and what to do about it. And if it seems like you can't kick the germs, you are not alone.
Yeah, you know, parents will come in and they'll say, gosh, they were sick last week, and then they seem to get better, and now they're sick again.
A pediatrician talks about how to help your family survive germ season and what remedies are real, which ones are myths. That's today on Mom Squad. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Mom Squad. I'm Maureen Kyle, and I am a self-proclaimed summer enthusiast. So let's just say this time of year is really rough for me, and I know I'm not the only one. In fact, last week my 6-year-old asked me, Mom, are you sick of winter? I said yes, and then she said, well, at least it's almost over. And then I had to break it to her, we have several more weeks to go. If you're watching this from a part of the country that gets hit hard by winter, you know this has been an especially cold one, and it can really take a toll on our mental health. I'm sure you've heard of seasonal affective disorder. It is classified as a type of depression. Some symptoms include sadness almost every day, anxiety, food cravings, especially carbohydrates, lack of energy, feeling easily agitated, sleeping problems, loss of interest in activities. And I have to mention, this isn't just for winter. Some people have seasonal affective disorder in the summer, but it's more common in the winter when there's not as much sunlight and time spent outside. There are ways to prevent SAD, as it's referred to, or at least manage it. We got a chance to talk to Dr. Dawn Potter from the Cleveland Clinic about best practices. Dawn, thank you so much for talking with us about seasonal affective disorder. This is not something new. I've been hearing about it for years. We've been doing stories about this for years, but every time winter rolls around, I hear people, like a lot of friends of mine are just saying, gosh, I'm just so exhausted today. I don't know what it is. Do you feel like people will suffer from SAD, as it's called, and not really realize it?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think we sort of know about it in popular culture, right? We know that people get down in the winter. However, it's important to distinguish between a little bit of maybe winter blues or feeling down and seasonal affective disorder, which can actually be very serious. So a person can end up sort of like falling behind on things in their life due to feeling tired, feeling depressed, feeling down, having no energy, difficulty concentrating. And sometimes that's when it's time to try to do something about it.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's sometimes pretty hard, I'm sure, for somebody who's feeling these feelings to realize, okay, this is just a phase, or wow, this is more serious. So what is the difference between, like, what would somebody be feeling if it's winter blues versus seasonal affective disorder?
So if you're feeling fatigued or sad or down or hopeless or generally disinterested in things, more days than not, like if it seems like it's almost every day, then you're probably getting into the territory of more clinical depression, where we might want to do something about it. Because if it's affecting you to the point where it is causing a lot of distress or it's interfering with your ability to do the things you would normally do, then there's help for this.
Is seasonal affective disorder, is that considered a type of depression, or is that is it more of like a gray area in terms of being diagnosed with depression?
No, it is actually a form of depression, which we would call major depressive disorder. And the thing that distinguishes seasonal affective disorder from major depressive disorder is that it occurs, as you would suspect, in a seasonal pattern. So typically onsetting in the fall and getting better in the spring.
Got it. So let's say somebody's starting to feel maybe some of these feelings, and maybe it's winter blues, or like that fine line between winter blues and maybe bordering on seasonal affective disorder. What are some of the ways they can either prevent it or start to treat themselves at home?
So things you can do at home are you almost have to work against what your sort of instinct is. So you feel tired, you want to stay in bed and rest. However, what you need to do is actually be getting up and getting exposure to bright light in the morning, because part of why we have seasonal affective disorder is thought to be due to like the less exposure to light in the wintertime. And so getting up and getting outside, or using a special kind of light for light therapy that's designed to combat seasonal affective disorder can help. Getting more exercise can help. Trying to eat healthy, even though you may not feel like it, because some symptoms of seasonal affective disorder are also often like overeating and oversleeping.
What would be considered oversleeping? Because I also just recently read that naturally our bodies tend to sleep a little bit longer in the winter. Like we almost hibernate just naturally, but like when would somebody be concerned? Like, okay, I'm sleeping more, or if you're noticing maybe your significant other is sleeping a lot longer than they should?
I think that's a good question. And people naturally vary in how much they prefer to sleep. So for a typical adult, I think 7 to 9 hours, somewhere in that ballpark. Like we always hear 8 hours, but not everybody needs exactly that. And some people do need a bit more. But if you're sleeping, let's say, I would say more than an hour longer than you normally would, that's probably not good.
Okay.
That's probably a sign that you're not feeling too good.
All right, that's good to know. Now, you mentioned the light therapy. And I can imagine anybody watching this or listening to this is thinking, oh gosh, I should get one of those lights. And maybe they're going to like Amazon to try and find it. What exactly is that light? Is it something we could buy, at a store, at a retailer? And what does that do for the body?
So there are specific lights designed for it, and I believe the guideline is something called 10,000 lux, and that you also want something that has like UV protection, so you're not getting any dangerous. So it's not dangerous to you, and I don't have any specific products that I would recommend. However, you could talk to your doctor and get their advice as well, and I would always recommend that, especially before purchasing any like expensive piece of health equipment, because you want to make sure you're getting a good quality. You want to make sure it's something you really need. And you also want to rule out that there could be other things that could help you.
Yeah.
Because while we might assume it's seasonal depression, it's always good to check with your doctor in case there's some other cause.
Very true. What about kids? Can kids suffer from seasonal affective disorder?
Yeah.
So what would what would we notice in our children?
Often probably the same things you would with adults. It may manifest differently in children. You would probably see them sleeping longer. Children can get more irritable when they're depressed. They may not express it as sadness. They may be more refusing to go to school, not wanting to do things, being more maybe clingy depending on the age.
So as a family, are there things that you would recommend? Like you already mentioned, like for an adult to go out and get some morning light, but is there anything that we should be thinking of just as a whole family to make sure that everybody stays, as mentally healthy as possible during these colder months?
Well, I think even as parents, we may not feel like doing it. We might want to bundle the kids up in the morning and get them outside and take them to the park or take them to do an activity. Even though it might take a long time to put on those boots and those mittens and everything, it really will help.
We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we take a look at how to combat seasonal affective disorder. And we hear from a pediatrician about why your kids are constantly sick right now and how to prevent it. Welcome back. We have been talking to Dr. Dawn Potter with the Cleveland Clinic about seasonal affective disorder. This is something you might wonder, am I suffering from this? We feel a little bit different in the winter, sometimes a little bit more tired, sometimes having a lack of interest in doing things. But there are ways to combat that feeling and when to know when it's more serious. Take a listen to our interview. When you say eating healthy, too, you kind of talked about that previously. What kind of foods do people crave junk foods when they feel like they're suffering from seasonal affective disorder?
Typically, yes, they probably would crave things like carbohydrates, like bread, sweets, chips, salty snacks, things like that.
Yeah. So this kind of lines up with maybe New Year's resolutions, people wanting to eat healthier. And so this is more than just, trying to lose weight. You think it's part of staying mentally healthy during these months too?
Absolutely. I think our food does a lot for our mood. Whether you're suffering from seasonal depression or not, eating healthy, meaning eating fruits and vegetables, eating things with fiber, getting good proteins, that actually helps regulate your energy throughout the day, which is really important for your mood because when we eat a lot of something sugary or that digests fast, we basically get a lot of energy at once and then our energy crashes afterwards. And that always makes people feel like cranky or down or tired.
So if anybody's watching this and thinking, this sounds exactly like me, what are the steps they should take?
So I think, first of all, you could try some of the things that are easy to do at home, like trying to take a look at your diet and eat healthier, trying to get more exercise and get outside in the morning, especially getting exposure to bright light. And if it's really cold, even just opening your curtains and having your breakfast right near the window can be helpful before, purchasing anything. And then if things are not starting to improve, I would then recommend as a second step seeing your doctor and talking to them about how you're feeling, because your doctor can assess if your symptoms are meeting criteria for clinical depression. If things are not improving through the things that we've already discussed, that there are medications, and there is also seeing a psychologist or counselor for talk therapy, and those things can help with seasonal depression as well.
And before I let you go, I know that we always kind of associate seasonal affective disorder with winter, but this can happen in other seasons as well?
Absolutely. There is an opposite pattern that can happen onsetting in the spring and getting better in the fall. And it's actually kind of the opposite of the types of symptoms that we associate with seasonal affective disorder. It still includes depression, but it can include more agitation and insomnia and anxiety versus the sort of hibernation feeling we associate with the winter type seasonal affective disorder.
Thank you again to Dr. Potter. Another reason why most parents are anticipating getting through winter is the desperation to get through sick season. If you feel like your kids have been constantly sick for the past several weeks, you're not going crazy. This is happening all over the country. We spoke with a pediatrician, Dr. Marianne Samego with the Cleveland Clinic. She gives us advice on how to stay healthy.
So I just finished clinic, and half of what we're seeing are kids that are coming in sick with illness and parents that are trying to decide if it's a new illness or if it's just this ongoing overlap, because there's so many infections that are coming on at the same time. And for some kids, they're sick for 10 days, better for 2, sick again for 10 days. So we're seeing a lot of respiratory viruses, especially.
I want to get to this right before we go into how to stay healthy.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of parents that I talk to always ask, oh my gosh, is this the same thing, or did we get one bug and then the other? Is there any way of telling if it's the same bug or if your child has picked up 2 different things?
Yep. Yeah, parents will come in and they'll say, gosh, they were sick last week, and then they seem to get better, and now they're sick again. And so it's that even if that window is just a day or 2, just enough to give you a clue that they were getting better, and now either something's gotten worse or they're getting exposed to a different virus.
So what is the best way to stay healthy?
So I think staying healthy always boils down to sleep and fluids, rest, and a good diet. And some of those are a little more important when it comes to preventing illness in winter. But, you can never go wrong by maintaining those healthy habits you have all year.
What do you recommend sleep-wise and diet-wise? What do you mean by that? Because, I think I'm putting my kids to bed early, and I think we eat healthy, but then, they always get sick. But, if we're really going to focus in on it, what do you recommend?
So with sleep, you want a good 8 to 10 hours. Some kids may need more sleep than that based on their age, but it's got to be restful sleep. They have to have a nice bedtime routine. They have to have the electronics out of the bedroom so that there's no disruption. Move that phone far away from the bed because all those little buzzes and light flashes are disruptive to sleep. And so I think that's really the best way to start. With eating, when kids come in, we're asking about fruits and vegetables, and it's for a reason. So many of them, like the leafy vegetables, the citrus fruits, the berries, beans, are so loaded with vitamin C. And so if we're taking a healthy diet in every day, then we can have that immune boost naturally, which will help us as we're getting through the sick season too.
Are there any other foods aside from fruits, vegetables, the dark leafy greens, anything else that helps keep the immunity up?
Well, I guess, dairy, a lot of dairy, chicken, a lot of what we eat that's plant-based is full of different nutrients. Like a lot of people will take zinc at the start of a cold because it might shorten the duration. And yet for the average individual who's taking a healthy diet, there's usually quite a bit of zinc and we meet that recommendation every day. So maybe that boost doesn't have to be so much when they're sick.
Interesting. I know when my kids come home, and they've been doing this a lot lately, where they come home and they tell me, Mom, guess what? 3 kids went home sick, or, so-and-so threw up in the class, or yep, all my friends were coughing. Is there anything a parent can do preventative? I know for adults, sometimes we down those vitamin C drinks, yep, but what do we do for kids?
I always say that the best defense is offense. And what I mean by that is if we maintain those healthy habits, then that is really the best way to reduce the chance that we might succumb to getting sick or get the illness. If nothing else, some of these supplements haven't been shown to make a difference. So there's no standard recommendation to say if you start this ahead of time, you are not going to get sick. And so that's why maintaining those healthy habits matter. The other thing is just monitoring. There's 5 different illnesses going around at a time. And so just watching your kid for the start of the sniffles or an upset stomach or a sore throat, and then kind of going from there to see are they getting sick or is it that in a day or two.
I have to ask, because you brought up the zinc and we've talked about vitamin C, but are there any other remedies that a parent should incorporate for kids?
So there, for most of the illnesses that are going around, I would say that most of what we recommend are home remedies. Sometimes a teenager will just look at me and sort of grimace when I say gargling salt water can still work. If you get a sore throat, kids over 8 can reliably gargle salt water. Rest and fluids. We really truly underestimate that our body needs time to get better. And so that rest that we get every night is time to heal, time to recover. And so it becomes really important. And hydration. Hydration prevents us from getting sick. It prevents us from feeling worse than we would, along with getting dehydrated. Coughs. We can find that honey works better than some of the over-the-counter meds. So we don't suggest parents go to the pharmacy and look at the over-the-counter meds and bring them home. A little bit of warm water with honey in it can work just as well as, say, a Robitussin. And the advantage of that is you're hydrating at the same time and your kid's maybe not paying attention because you just dissolve that honey in the water and they drink it because it tastes good. And you're serving a couple of purposes at the same time.
Okay, so you heard Dr. Samego mention gargling salt water. That's something my mom would make me do as a kid, but what is the purpose? After the break, she explains the science behind it and some other remedies that you can try at home. Welcome back. Right before we took the break, we were talking with pediatrician and internal medicine's Dr. Marianne Samego about what to do if your children are sick right now. In a few minutes, we also talk about the most dangerous winter activities for kids. But first, she mentioned gargling with salt water among other remedies, and I've always wondered, why does that work? brought up the gargling with salt water, which is something my mom always made me do the second I was going, oh, my throat kind of hurts.
Yeah.
What's the science behind that?
Well, I think it's symptomatic relief. It's not getting rid of the illness or shortening anything. You know, most of what we do for illnesses is comfort-based. So along with gargling salt water to alleviate some of the soreness with the throat, it's just like treating a fever or treating a cough. All of those things are signs we're sick, but they're actually necessary to get better, and they're signs that our body's fighting it. So, you know, treating a sore throat's important because kids may not be able to take fluids, they may not be able to eat, and so either Tylenol or gargling salt water can kind of minimize some of that soreness so that they get more nutrition and more hydration in.
Yeah, and with hydration, is just plain old water okay? Or, I mean, is there anything else that, you know, there's all these products that are on the market, but what should we be focusing on?
So it depends on the age of the kid. I mean, for the younger kids, some of them may only take milk, and we might cringe at the thought and say, oh, that's not what we want when we're sick. But we don't want your child to get dehydrated. And if they're going to drink the milk and the formula, then we want to keep that up. We don't want to change course. Water is an excellent hydrator, but it's not full of any electrolytes, and it doesn't really have calories. So it's a mixture of fluids. For older kids, it might be ginger ale and Gatorade. For some of the other younger kids, it might be Pedialyte. Those fluids have electrolytes in them, so they help prevent that imbalance, especially the imbalance that might come when someone's throwing up or has diarrhea. You know, those fluids become probably more important there. Ginger ale is really good because ginger naturally tends to calm the stomach, and so there is some science behind using ginger ale when folks have an upset stomach or they really need some extra hydration.
Yeah, and I want to ask too, while I have you, injuries. Now, I have friends who are pediatricians, and I have, you know, just regular parent friends that say that this is the time of year where they see some accidents happen. Where do you think the most injuries take place during the winter months for kids?
Well, you know, I think the main source of injury is actually in our backyard because kids aren't paying attention to hypothermia, which is a lower body temperature, or frostbite. I mean, those are probably the two most common injuries that we see. For other kids who may be skiing and snowmobiling, a lot of those accidents are going to also be related to frostbite because those fast-paced activities tend to lend themselves to a bit more susceptibility to frostbite. But then you add on needing the proper gear so that you don't get a head injury or fall or things like that. I think that's really the two types of injuries: that physical injury where you want to keep kids geared up and ready, but probably more importantly is that cold weather injuries. So proper layering. People think a heavy coat's enough. And honestly, the layers work better because when you have that soft layer under and the middle layer, you're creating air pockets and you're actually trapping the heat in and keeping the ventilation there. And so we can reduce a lot of that risk for low temperature by just layering, which is...
I was going to say, I need you to come and talk to my kids who just put on the big puffy coat with no hat and no gloves, and they're going, I'm fine.
That's right. Until their fingers are numb and they're feeling a little, and when that's the other key is just making sure kids come in for a break. Older kids might have that thermostat and come in, but younger kids are going to stay out and play forever and make the snow angels and forget that their clothes are wet and their hands are starting to get really tingly.
Yeah. What about, you brought up like sledding, skiing. I know with skiing there's a lot of equipment, but with sledding, should we be bringing extra gear? Like, should kids be wearing helmets? I mean, do we need to gear up a little bit more when we have that sled?
Yeah, you know, I think we're in an area where sometimes you're sledding in an environment that's icy. So we don't have that cushion of snow all the time. And so you can gain some really fast speeds when you're sledding. And depending on the experience of the kid, I'd recommend most of the time an older adult sled with them so that you have that assurance that they know what they're doing. They can guide the slide. You know, it's got to be in an open area. You don't want fences at the bottom. You don't want trees in the way. So they're just obstacles. And then there's just the protective gear. And that might include knee pads, elbow pads, always a helmet, because head injuries are just something that's so common and yet can be reduced by just proper gear. Sunscreen, people forget about that. Skiers will come back with bright red faces because the snow really reflects that sunlight. And so that's just another little tidbit in trying to keep healthy when you're staying active and outside.
Thank you to Dr. Samego for taking the time with us today. And that's a wrap for our winter survival episode. You know, you can catch all of the episodes you may have missed on our Mom Squad YouTube page. And follow us on Facebook, Mom Squad with Maureen Kyle. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next time.